Good morning. Uh, do you remember the Jerry Maguire movie when Tom Cruise was a sports agent and his football star client was Cuba Gooding Jr.? I remember very little about the movie with the exception of one line that the football star constantly shouted at his agent: "Show me the money." Well, recently, my wife and I spent a grueling hour in the office of the agent we visit once a year as he reviews and helps us prepare our income tax forms. The entire time that he spends entering our accumulated data for the year, computing, adding, configuring, and reconfiguring, it's as if we are hearing the echoes of "Show me the money" bouncing off the walls in his office. Then we'll get the verdict and understand why the governor was smiling when he sent out all those token rebates a couple of months ago. Now his smile will be even bigger as we again do our part in replenishing the coffers. In a church where we were previously members, there was a man who always paid his tithe after he had filled out his tax forms for the year. He wanted to make sure that every penny that went to the government would not be counted as his income when he offered his 10% tithe to the church. Of course, any gifts, special offerings, and so forth that he had given during the course of the year would also be subtracted. The image of a cheerful giver would never be illustrated in this annual pilgrimage, but at least the obligation would be fulfilled until tax season of next year. I guess that I find the giving unto Caesar a bit harder to swallow, but I will begrudgingly send in my check. Maybe that will serve as my rationale for being able to voice my disagreements with how the government misuses it. How many times are we asked questions that may lead to consequences for us? Does this dress make me look fat? Or did you notice anything different about the house? Well, when Jesus saw the group of people who were approaching him as he taught, he knew that they were not truly interested in hearing his interpretation of the scriptures, nor in the perception of a genuine relationship with God. Some had possibly been in attendance when he had been asked about the source of his authority. This time, the makeup of the group included Pharisee disciples and Herodians, an uncommon mixture of extremes. The Pharisees were Jewish reformist scholars of Judaism, first appearing less than 200 years before Jesus. There were both liberal and conservative factions of that group. Some of Jesus' reformist ideas may have resulted in their passion to discover which faction he most represented. The most conservative group, would have attempted to be more rigid in interpreting and prescribing Jewish law. The Herodians were ardent supporters of the Roman government, and while their motives would have been almost polar opposite those of the Pharisees, they were willing to participate in an effort to unmask Jesus and discover why people were so attentive to his ideas. Let's read now Matthew, the 22nd chapter, verses 15 through 22. Then the Pharisees met together to find a way to trap Jesus in his words. They sent their disciples along with the supporters of Herod to him. "Teacher," they said, "we know that you are genuine and that you will teach God's way as it really is. We know you're not swayed by people's opinions because you don't show favoritism. So tell us what you think. Does the law allow people to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" Knowing their evil motives, Jesus replied, "Why do you test me, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used to pay the tax." And they brought him a denarius. "Whose image and inscription is this?" he asked. "Caesar's," they replied. Then he said, "Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God." When they heard this, they were astonished, and they departed. Notice that this group attempted to use fake flattery to allow Jesus to drop his guard and enable them to entrap him by asking a question that would reveal either his disregard for Jewish law and tradition or his attempt to stir up the masses against the Roman authorities. The Pharisee disciples possibly represented Jews who resented the poll tax that the Roman government in Judea forced upon them. During Passover, Jews from Galilee traveled to Jerusalem and would have taxes imposed upon them which would have to be paid in Roman currency. Galilee was not under direct Roman rule. They were governed by Antipas, not Caesar. One of the features in the temple area would have been for the money changers who would provide Roman coinage for their Jewish money. Overturning the tables, as Jesus had done, would have impacted both groups. So their loaded question, does the law allow people to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Well, that's why the question came up. The traditional Jews hated the idea of this poll tax imposed on them, simply because it would go to a treasure chest for Roman officials. It had no other purpose, not provide for better roads or services or anything else, just feed the greed of the Romans. If Jesus spoke out against these taxes, he could be branded as a revolutionary, attempting to stir up the people in opposition to the Roman authorities. But Jesus recognized their intent and called out the questioners for what they were, a group of hypocrites, and he asked them to show him the coin that would be used to pay the tax. The word hypocrite originated in ancient Greece. It was a term associated with the Greek dramas, particularly with the mask used by actors that enabled them to represent various characters in the production. Putting on a mask to disguise identity or intent was done by hypocrites. But Jesus could see behind the mask. Notice he asked them to bring him a coin. He probably did not even have one, but he also wanted one that came from the group, because that in itself would reveal hypocrisy. The coin would have an image of Caesar on it. To the strict Jews, such an etching would have been a graven image, reflecting allegiance to a human authority rather than to God. To the Herodians, it would represent an appropriate allegiance to the government and its leadership. Jesus' question to them was, whose image and inscription is on the coin? There was no avoiding the answer. The image was clearly that of Caesar. Jesus' answer did not reveal revolutionary ideas that would be seen as an indictment of either group. It would be up to the interpretation of each group to determine their personal loyalty. Give unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. Specifying what those things were or could be would be up to the individuals who heard him. It was a puzzle that each group was left to ponder. They were astonished to the point that they did not even continue the conversation. Trying to do so, they would be forced to reveal their personal opinions, which would possibly create greater friction among themselves. Such a simple answer to such a complex issue now echoes from the past into our present, and we are left to contemplate our personal struggles with this issue. If we take a coin out of a pocket or a coin purse, what kind of image do we see on it? What inscription will we find? To whom do we give our loyalty? Do we have a greater allegiance to one more than another? Sometimes we have to weigh loyalty to the government with loyalty to our faith or conscience. I have taught students who would not pledge allegiance to the flag because they had been taught that their religious values would be compromised by it. I also can recall years when every graduate would have been presented a Bible, and there would have been a morning devotion and meditation and prayer to begin every school day. And I can also remember when public schools no longer permitted prayer or devotional time. Most of us can recall when no alcoholic beverages or products could be sold on Sundays, when women would be prohibited from wearing pants to school or to church, or when sports or school activities were not held on Wednesday evenings. I can also remember hearing sermons that classified rock and roll as the devil's music. You know, there will continue to be challenges about where lines should be drawn. Religion doesn't need to be fanatical, but lives without moral boundaries demean individuals. Jesus looked at a coin and saw the image of a man on a piece of metal. Its value was only valued in the world of man. Jesus could look at the people around him and could see that they were created in the image of God. Their real worth could be shown in the value that they placed on that image. Let's pray together. Dear God, please forgive us if we have attempted to put selfishness and greed before our reverence for you. Help us to honor you by allowing your love to guide us each day. Amen.